Welcome, friends. Today, we're going to watch an emotional science movie. What if you got an AI brain? What miracles would you perform? Comment below. Without wasting any time, let's watch the movie. At the beginning, a helicopter is chasing a car. Inside the car, there's a man and a boy. Suddenly, that man stops the car and tells the kid to run into the forest and never come back to the road. After that, the man continues driving alone. The helicopter keeps chasing him. Realizing he can't escape, he drives the car and crashes in a terrible accident. The boy who went into the forest, his name is Daryl. He is the hero of our story. Daryl has lost all his memories. He doesn't remember anything, not who he is, what to do next, or where to go. Confused, and he stands alone in the forest. At that moment, an old couple who were out trekking saw him. They went to him and asked about his parents. Daryl says, "My name is Daryl. Other than that, I don't remember anything." The old couple decided to help Daryl and took him to an orphanage. While the old man went inside to talk to the staff, Daryl noticed some kids playing basketball nearby. Curious, he walked over to watch the game. As the match went on, one of the boys asked him who he was, but Daryl couldn't answer. He didn't remember anything about himself, not even why he was there. Feeling lost, he came back to the car. At the orphanage, they gave Daryl a proper bath and cleaned him up. They also decided to check his health, so he was taken for an eye exam. During the checkup, the doctor asked him to read the letters on the eye chart. Daryl turned, looked at the board for just a second, and tells all the letters perfectly without even looking again. The doctor was amazed by Daryl's ability. From this, they realized that Daryl's health and vision were in perfect condition, and he was eligible for adoption. One of the employees at the orphanage then thought of a close friend, a man who had been childless for a long time. The employee believed that Daryl's parents might show up eventually, but until then, his friend could keep Daryl at home and begin the process of getting certified for adoption. Without wasting time, the employee rushed to the construction site where his friend Andy was working. Andy agrees and tells his friend to bring the boy. Meanwhile, on the other side, we see Andy's wife, Joyce. Joyce is passionate about music and plays the piano beautifully. She also teaches piano to the neighborhood kids. Just then, Andy arrives and says to her, "I have a surprise for you." He steps aside and reveals Daryl. Joyce is instantly happy when she sees him. Daryl politely addresses them as sir and ma'am, but Joyce gently tells him, "You can call us by our names." She then takes Daryl to see around the house. Seeing the bond forming between Joyce and Daryl, both Andy and his friend feel happy and satisfied. That night, while Daryl is asleep, Joyce quietly tells Andy, "He's such a sweet boy. He understands me so well, and I was happy while spending time with him." But Andy replies with concern, "Don't get too emotionally attached. He'll be gone if his real parents show up, and that will hurt you more." Andy tells. The next morning, while Joyce was working, a boy saw her from outside the house. His name was Jivan. Curious, Jivan asked Joyce about the new boy who had come to stay. Joyce called Daryl over and introduced them. Jivan and Daryl quickly became friends. As they talked, Jivan asked Daryl how he had forgotten everything but still remembered his name. Daryl explained, "I remember some basic things like my name, how to speak, and a few other things. That's all." Later, Jivan took Daryl to his house and introduced him to his elder sister. While they were playing, Jivan started playing a car racing video game. He reached a high score and proudly showed it to his sister. And Daryl started to play the game. Daryl began playing, and to everyone's surprise, he passed all the levels effortlessly, eventually beating the highest score. Jivan's sister was amazed and asked him, "Are you really playing this game for the first time?" The next day, Jivan and Daryl went to school together. In class, the teacher handed out a question paper and told the students to fill it in as he read the questions aloud. But before the teacher even finished reading the first few lines, Daryl had already completed the entire paper. Surprised, the teacher looked at Daryl's sheet and was shocked and confused by how quickly and accurately he had answered everything. In the next scene, Andy took Daryl and Jivan to play baseball. He asked Daryl, "Have you ever played this game before?" Daryl replied, "No." Andy handed him a bat and told him to try hitting the ball. He threw the first ball slowly, and Daryl hits it. Thinking it was just beginner's luck, Andy threw the next ball faster, but Daryl hit that too, perfectly. Andy was impressed and said, "You're playing really well. You're going to be on our street team for the upcoming match. I'm the coach, by the way." Then Andy threw another fast pitch. Daryl hit it so hard that the ball smashed a window of their house. Instead of being angry, Joyce was smiling, clearly happy and amazed by Daryl's talents. That evening, Daryl and his friend's family gathered together. Daryl's friend's wife asked, "How is Daryl?" Joyce replied, "He's perfect in everything. And that's what concerns me." But friend's wife responded, "Isn't that what every parent wants? A perfect kid? You should be happy." That night, Jivan's sister returned home after a date. Meanwhile, the boys were communicating through walkie-talkies. Daryl replied to Jivan while watching TV. The next day, they were preparing for the baseball match. Andy went to an ATM to withdraw cash, but couldn't complete the transaction. Daryl asked for the card and tried it himself. He asked Andy for the password and successfully withdrew the cash. As Andy was about to leave, Daryl noticed the low balance in Andy's account and said, "Give me a minute." He then hacked the ATM using his intelligence and changed the account balance to $1 million. After that, Andy and his team were practicing. Watching them, the opposing team's coach scoffed and said, "My team is going to win this match." Meanwhile, Jivan arrived. Andy said, "I forgot the ice water. Can you bring it from the house?" Jivan quietly snuck into Andy's house. There, Joyce and Jivan's family were talking about Daryl. Jivan hid and listened. Joyce said, "Daryl does everything by himself. He washes his own clothes, cleans the floor, keeps his room neat, agrees to everything we say, never argues or causes trouble. He doesn't feel like a child. I don't feel like I'm parenting." After hearing this, Jivan made some noise, pretended to be entering just then, and asked Joyce for the ice water for Andy. Back on the field, the baseball match began. Wickets were falling in Daryl's team. Then Daryl entered the ground. The opposing team's coach laughed at the sight of him, but Daryl hit the very first ball out of the ground. The crowd cheered loudly. However, Daryl didn't know he had a run after hitting the ball. Andy shouted instructions, and Daryl began running, completing the score. On the next few balls, he hit multiple boundaries. The opposing coach was shocked. After the innings, Daryl came to Joyce and said, "Look at Andy. He's happy." Joyce replied, "Yes, he's happy. He's been happy ever since you arrived." But then she turned away quietly, looking a bit sad. Jivan noticed this. Daryl turned to Jivan and said, "Joyce doesn't seem happy. Why does she look sad?" Jivan replied, "Because you're perfect in every way. You act like an adult. There's no childishness in you." Trying to understand, Daryl went back into the game. This time, he intentionally missed the ball and got out. The opposing coach celebrated, and he asked what happened. But Daryl got frustrated and argued with him before walking away angrily. Joyce watched this and smiled. For the first time, Daryl had acted like a real kid. She went to him and comforted him. Now, only one run was needed to win the match. Jivan was the last player. He managed to hit the ball, and everyone watched eagerly to see if he would make it in time. At the very last second, Jivan reached the base and completed the run. Andy's team won the match for the first time ever. Joyce, Andy, and everyone were overjoyed. After this, Daryl became very close to Joyce and Andy. He even started calling them Mom and Dad. Joyce began teaching him piano, and Daryl learned quickly, playing beautifully. They had become a beautiful family. But just then, shocking news reached Andy. His friend informed him that Daryl's real parents had come to take him back. By knowing this, Andy and Joyce were heartbroken. Daryl said to Andy, "I don't want to go. I want to stay here." Andy, holding back tears, replied, "You have to leave, Daryl. They're your real mom and dad." He hugged Daryl tightly, filled with sadness. Joyce, too, was deeply emotional and looked sad. Soon, Daryl's biological parents arrived to pick him up. Daryl told them, "I'll come after my friend arrives." Meanwhile, Jivan was feeling heartbroken knowing Daryl was leaving. His mother gently tried to console him, saying, "You won't be able to see Daryl anymore. So come, let's go meet him one last time." While they were on their way, Jivan spotted Daryl from a distance. Overwhelmed with emotion, He broke down in tears and ran back home, unable to face the moment. Daryl noticed Jivan running away and looked confused. He turned to his real father and asked, "Why is he crying?" His father replied, "Because he loves you deeply, and he couldn't bear to say goodbye. Don't worry, he'll be okay." Meanwhile, Jivan's mother continued to comfort him at home. Jivan's sister and Joyce's family also sent him with his parents and became sad after he is gone. On the other end, Daryl's parents entered the airport. Seeing the airplanes, Daryl became excited and asked them, "Are we going on a flight?" They smiled and said, "Yes." Soon, they boarded a private jet. After takeoff, Daryl asked, "Can I see how the flight is operated?" They agreed, and the pilots taught him the basics of how to operate the aircraft. Meanwhile, back home, Andy and Joyce were sad. Joyce told Andy, "I shouldn't have let him go." Andy, trying to stay composed, replied, "He had to go. They're his real parents." The jet eventually landed at a high-security research facility. Once inside, Daryl was restrained to a research table. It was then revealed that the people he thought were his parents were actually scientists. They exposed the truth. Daryl wasn't born. He was created. They had developed him as part of a classified artificial intelligence project. Daryl had a human-like body, but instead of a biological brain, they implanted a highly advanced AI system. The man who had taken Daryl and gave him freedom from the research center was also a scientist. He had grown fond of Daryl and believed he should be allowed to live a normal life like any other child. That's why he erased Daryl's memory and left him in the forest. Because of his AI, Daryl had been able to do things like beat high scores in video games, hack ATMs, and excel in sports like baseball. Now, the scientists began retrieving information from Daryl's brain. They watched footage from the baseball game and noticed something odd. Daryl had deliberately missed a shot and gotten out. One of the scientists asked him, "Why did you out on that game willingly? That was impossible for you." Daryl responded, "Because Joyce was happy when I acted like a regular kid." The scientists were stunned. Daryl wasn't designed to make independent emotional decisions. They started running more tests. When they told Daryl it was just a routine check, he said, "I'm scared." Hearing that shocked them even more. He wasn't supposed to feel fear or any emotion, yet he did. One of the lead scientists realized something extraordinary had happened. Daryl was just becoming human. He was feeling. But Daryl had been created for military purposes. In the next meeting, the lead scientist explained to the military officials, Daryl is now capable of feeling all human emotions, including fear. But the Army commander wasn't pleased. This project was designed to build fearless AI soldiers, he said. If he feels fear, he's useless for combat. Shut the project down. Start over. Build an adult robot. With emotionless, he told the scientist. The lead scientist, who had worked on Daryl for years, was sad. This was supposed to be a machine, but he had become something more. He had become human. Sad but determined, the scientist visited Daryl. Daryl looked at him and asked, "Will you do me a favor?" The scientist replied, "Of course. What do you want?" Daryl said softly, "I want to meet Andy and Joyce again." The scientist calmed, then smiled. "Only Andy and Joyce? What about your crying friend?" Daryl nodded. "Yes, I want to see my friend too." A female scientist, who overheard this, asked, "Are you really going to do what he asked?" The lead scientist answered, "The military wants to shut this project down. Before that happens, I'll make sure he gets what he wants." In the next scene, the scientist brought Andy, Joyce, and Jivan to the research facility. As military guards scanned them at the gate, Joyce and Andy looked around, confused and concerned. Andy noticed Daryl's name on several machines and asked the scientist, "What's going on here?" The scientist explained, "We were never his real parents. In fact, Daryl has no parents. He was created using artificial intelligence. He's a superhuman." He added, "Do you know how he got the name D.A.R.Y.L? It's an acronym. Data Analyzing Robot Youth Life Form." He pointed to the machines, where Daryl's memories were stored and analyzed. He tried to explain everything, but Joyce was in disbelief. Meanwhile, Jivan wandered off and found Daryl's room. Daryl's face lit up when he saw Jivan. Moments later, Joyce and Andy entered the room. Overjoyed, D.A.R.Y.L jumped up and hugged them tightly. Emotions overwhelmed everyone. But their reunion was cut short. The scientist rushed them out and said, "You have to leave now, but I promise I will hand him over to you in 5 days." He watched them go, silently hoping he could keep that promise. That night, the military surrounded the research lab. The Army commander learned that the scientist had allowed the family to meet D.A.R.Y.L. Furious, he stormed into the lab and confronted the scientist. "I told you to shut down Project D.A.R.Y.L," the commander said. "You disobeyed my orders." The scientist said, "D.A.R.Y.L may be a robot, but he's become human with real emotions. If we eliminate him, it's like killing him." But the commander didn't care. He threatened the scientist, saying, "Eliminate D.A.R.Y.L now, or I'll eliminate the entire project." Reluctantly, the scientist agreed to kill D.A.R.Y.L. He left the lab and told the commander, "It's done. Project D.A.R.Y.L has been eliminated." The commander checked the system, and the screen showed that D.A.R.Y.L had indeed been terminated. Meanwhile, the scientist underwent a routine security check as he left the facility. His car was thoroughly searched, but no evidence was found, and they cleared him to leave. However, as the commander was about to leave, he noticed something odd. In the last system check, instead of showing "terminated," the message showed, "Somehow, we should escape from here." The commander's suspicion grew. He immediately called for the security team to investigate. What the commander didn't know was that the scientist hadn't killed D.A.R.Y.L at all. In fact, he had hidden D.A.R.Y.L in the back seat of his car to help him escape. The soldiers began chasing them, and the scientist drove desperately, trying to escape from them. But wherever he went, the army followed. Then, D.A.R.Y.L spoke up, "Do you trust me?" The scientist nodded, and D.A.R.Y.L switched seats, taking control of the car. He drove at full speed, causing the army cars to crash. But even more police cars were chasing them. D.A.R.Y.L expertly maneuvered the car through heavy traffic, performing a dangerous two-wheel drive maneuver to slip through a gap and escape. After a thrilling chase, they finally escaped from the police cars. As the sun rose the next day, they parked the car in a remote area to avoid detection. The scientist and D.A.R.Y.L stole a car from a nearby farmhouse. They drove away, but soon noticed a police checkpoint ahead. Thinking quickly, D.A.R.Y.L gave the scientist an idea. He got out of the car and walked around the forest and came to the police car. He removed all the fuses in the car. After the security check, the scientist drove the car for some distance, and D.A.R.Y.L got into the car. The police noticed this and tried to chase them, but the car wouldn't start. Immediately, the officer took a shotgun and fired it into the sky, signaling to another cop waiting a little further down the road. The second officer shot at the car. The scientist was wounded, but he managed to hit the police car, pushing it out of the way. He continued driving, but the police car was damaged and unable to chase them further. Despite the chaos, the scientist struggled to maintain control of the car. "I'm sorry," he said to D.A.R.Y.L. "I should never have tried to separate you from your family. You deserve to be free." With those last words, the scientist passed away. For the first time, D.A.R.Y.L cried. After a moment of sorrow, he left the place and continued on his journey. That night, D.A.R.Y.L hung like Spider-Man on a fence. It was an Air Force base, and several fighter jets were stationed there. D.A.R.Y.L sneaked inside, remembering how the pilots had taught him to operate an aircraft. He climbed into one of the jets, started it up, and took off. The soldiers at the base were stunned, but they couldn't stop him. The commander watched the flight on the cameras and tried to contact D.A.R.Y.L via radio, threatening to shoot him down if he didn't land the jet immediately. D.A.R.Y.L smiled and, in a playful gesture, placed a piece of bubble gum on the camera lens, blocking the view. Furious, the commander ordered the jet to be destroyed. The timer for the missile launch began. Meanwhile, D.A.R.Y.L used the jet's radio system and contacted Jivan. "I'm coming on the way home. Meet me at the nearby lake," D.A.R.Y.L said. Just before the timer ran out, D.A.R.Y.L ejected from the jet, and it exploded mid-air. Jivan, hearing the message, quickly told his sister, and the two of them headed to the lake. D.A.R.Y.L, using a parachute, landed in the lake water but didn't know how to swim. He lost consciousness and started to drown. Jivan, seeing this, immediately swam toward him. He pulled D.A.R.Y.L to the shore. Back at the Air Force Base, The commander was informed that the jet had been destroyed. However, he had his doubts. Could he have ejected, he asked. The team confirmed that if Daryl had ejected over the lake, he would have drowned, and his AI brain would be damaged beyond repair. At the hospital, Daryl was declared dead. Joyce and Andy, devastated, returned home in sorrow. But just as all hope seemed lost, a lady scientist appeared at the hospital. Using her equipment, she revived Daryl. Back at Jeevon's house, both Jeevon's family and Daryl's family were mourning the loss. Jeevon's sister tried to comfort him, but they were all heartbroken. Then, out of nowhere, Daryl appeared. He ran toward his family, and when Joyce and Andy saw him, they were overcome with joy. They hugged him tightly, tears of happiness streaming down their faces. And so, the story ends with Daryl finally reunited with his family. His journey had been long and full of challenges, but he had found his place in the world. Hope you all enjoyed.